Let me put it this way. But now, when we are discussing this coming budget, first of all, the budget, my minister is going, I cannot preempt, and in any case I don't know, I cannot preempt the speech of the minister, which is going to be on revenues. And the presidency State of the Nation address, I think, which is next week. What I can only do is to give the context in which now we are, because I think some people may be confused. The budget which was constructed didn't seem to be taking into account the impact of COVID. For example, it is built on the assumption that GDP will grow next year at probably 6% or above. That is now the situation which has changed. The GDP will, at the best, the best, if we take this year, probably will grow at probably 3% instead of over 6%. Next year, we'll probably would be lucky. For the calendar year, would be lucky if you get about calendar year 20. Would be lucky to get probably a growth above 0%. I think any country which will get in 20 calendar year, any country which will get more than above 0% will be a record country. And therefore, the context of the budget which is going to be there has dramatically changed. GDP has been, as I said, it will be lower. The service sector, for example, tourism, trade, and informal sector, which contributes about 43%, has been badly affected. Savings, agriculture probably has not been as badly affected. But remember, we are facing, in the case of Uganda, we are facing 3 emergencies: the COVID disease, the floods, and the Lake Victoria and all these other areas, and the locusts. So when you are discussing this budget and next budget, you must take into account the impact of these ones. 3. When other countries maybe are facing 1, for us we are facing 3, same as Kenya, Somalia, and whatever. Therefore, and this has affected badly not only the informal that sector, but savings have been badly destroyed. The balance of payments, if you take the balance of payments, is a different situation as of today, and tomorrow will be different because tourism, services, and all those kind of things have been badly damaged. These were, and of course, and also remittances. We are talking about more than $2 trillion. And also foreign investment, these are going down next year. These are have been badly affected, will be badly affected for the next year. Then when you are discussing, you must take this into account. Poverty, as a mayor, of course, we are looking at, say, maybe about 2.6 people will move back to poverty. That's the context which we are in. Now, the health situation, as we there, is still there, the emergence. And therefore, I want to say that the budget, the one of the, which people, the discussants which I've seen, the commentators, have been the way talking. And I've just been in the kitchen looking. Amazingly, that it is as if government revenue has not been destroyed. Where is it coming from? Take, for example, last month. Was it April, I think? April. More than 650 billion was wiped off of the revenue. And you can understand that situation. And therefore the treasury itself, which everybody is looking at to get the solutions, support, is itself leaders, is in emergence. It's probably is itself in emergence. And that's the context which people must take into account. But having said that, I just want to say we have also been working very hard behind the lines to get solutions. And according to government, a number of areas which will be there. First, we must also be positive, not negative. We are looking at import substitution to help the industries, industrial sector, and agro-processing and agriculture get back on foot. And we support them through loans which we have negotiated from government partners. We are also talking about prioritizing areas so that we can put money into the economy. The demand is down, we need to get the economy. When people talk about stimulus, I think stimulus, as far as I'm concerned, is to get the demand, the aggregate demand up. Because even if you put money in industries, they cannot produce unless somebody is consuming the goods. And that is very important when you are discussing the next budget and the economy. We are also looking at supporting a number of areas. For example, we are looking at negotiating with donors, microcredits facilities, so that we can support the poor and they get cheaper microcredits. We are looking at supporting the production and productivity in agriculture, distribution of inputs, and we are looking at a possibility of doing it through the voucher. Will be very important, supporting the poor. We are also looking at supporting those communities come next year who have been affected by the floods and locusts. In this case, a number of public facilities have been destroyed. Schools, health units, and other areas, roads, and therefore we are looking at supporting those. In particular, where we can, government is looking at labor, how do you call it? Labor-intensive works. We are also looking, the minister will be announcing soon a number of other fiscal measures that are important, and together with first still working on, and today we are going to have another meeting with, for example, tourism sector team, together with central bank and ourselves, see what we can advise the minister to support that sector which has been badly affected. For example, I am just giving an example. Therefore, I just was giving a little time. Let me stop there. I'm not the keynote speaker. I was giving the context. Therefore, this budget, in my view, will be immediately adjusted, not from revenue point of view. I can see Minister looking at me. Good morning, Minister. Yes. Yes, kindly listen to me, Minister. But there will also, an expenditure, there will be a lot of adjustments that will take place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, PSST, Keith Mohakanizi. Please do stay with us because you will give a rebuttal to our keynote speech or presentation by Ramadan Gobi. But allow me to invite the Executive Director, ACODE, Dr. Arthur Beinomcha, to come and make opening remarks. Over to you, Arthur.
Why can't you sit here? Why do you want to
He's in a pillar. We can't see him.
Okay.
Sir, next time we have this room on the top floor.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mutsha. The Permanent Secretary, Mr. Keith Mohakanizi. The IMF representative, Ms. Clara Mira, who is linking with us on the Zoom. Dr. Eric Karuhanga, the President of Private Sector Foundation, who is also linking with us on the Zoom. Mr. Dixon Kateshumba, Commissioner Domestic Taxes, URA. Dr. Maxime Honato, the country representative, UN Women. Reverend Canon Dr. John Senyonyi, the Vice Chancellor, Uganda Christian University, who is also the chairman of Vice Chancellors in this country. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Govi Ramadan. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. A good morning to you and our audience out there who are following us on NBS television and NTV television, but also on Twitter and other social media. Let me take this opportunity first to thank God, the Almighty, for allowing us to organize such a thing, because we were locked up until about 2 days ago, and we are able to organize this. So can we put a round of applause to our Almighty? And I want to say this without fear or favor, because this country has been saved this pandemic, because the president, with the wisdom of the Almighty, did not shy away, organized the national prayers, and this country, we see it is saved. So I want to thank God. I want to thank the president for that insight, that on the onset of this pandemic, the nation prayed. And I think 2 national prayers have been organized. I want also to take this opportunity to thank the National Task Force for the work well done, the health workers, and the people of Uganda for listening to the guidelines and waited. And I remember the president quoted Isaiah 26:20, that hide in your chambers for a little while, and the anger of God until the hunger of God subsides. So our people have been patient. I want to thank you for waiting. So we are facing a crisis that we have not known. This is an enemy, it's a non-military threat in terms of peace and security. This is a threat to international peace and security, and we have never witnessed it. And I think our military people, as people in security, were caught off guard to confront this enemy. But the enemy is here, has brought the mighty down, and has spared the small people. I remember when it started, they said Africa, there will be dead bodies littered across the capitals in Africa. We have not seen that, but we have seen big countries actually suffer. So the COVID-19 has destroyed global economies and has pushed countries back into poverty. Africa was rising, actually was projected to, most of the African economies on average to grow at around 5.2%. This has been pushed. A lot of people have been pushed back into poverty, and this is serious. I should also appreciate the PS, the Permanent Secretary, and our partners and our Budget Transparency Initiative for organizing this. As ladies and gentlemen, you can see we are in the conference facility of the Minister of Finance. Can we applaud him and the team as well? So the impact of COVID-19 is so intense. It has pushed global economies into recession. It has also actually caused tensions, especially between the big powers, the US and China. Their relationship is almost going back to the Cold War era. And actually, the Congress is threatening to put some pressures on China because of Hong Kong. So many businesses, small and medium enterprises have closed down, some way down because of the loans, and this has been very serious. Food insecurity in some societies, communities, especially those that are urban. Revenue collection, I know that we have the commissioner here will be telling us the level of decline in terms of collection. Government projections, especially infrastructure development. Most of you have seen that there's no construction work going on. But we have also seen multiple problems coming up, and that's why we think I see the hand of God on this one. How could we see the locusts, the floods, and the pandemic? Africa is rising. The objective of this high-level policy dialogue, ladies and gentlemen, is to provide an opportunity for Ugandans of different walks of life to discuss, to engage in a constructive discussion and propose mechanisms and interventions that can save our economy and put us back to recovery and actually economic transformation. Once again, I want to thank the Permanent Secretary and your entire team. I know that when the economy is at risk, it is you who has shouldered this, of course, with other agencies, including Bank of Uganda. But I know that you shoulder, you may not have slept. So I want to appreciate you. I want to appreciate, of course, the President and appreciate Ugandans again. So ladies and gentlemen, join us to come up with constructive ideas so that this country will rise over the tide of this COVID-19, the locusts and the floods, so that we can donate to the rest of the world as we emerge from the pandemic. I welcome you and I look forward to constructive engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arthur. And I want to mention the people on Zoom are also clapping Arthur, but we can't hear them right now. So don't ask why there are few hand claps. We are not so many in this room. I also wanted PSST to request and remind you that you are supposed to officially open this budget month. So if you could use your microphone and say you are officially opening the budget month, the media will capture it, sir.
Officially opened.
Thank you, PS. All right. So now, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, invite our keynote speaker. He will be speaking to the budget priorities for financial year 2020-2021 and post-COVID-19 fiscal stimulus options. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Ramadan Ngobi, a lecturer at Makerere University Business School.
Thank you very much, Maurice, the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, the Executive Directors of ACODE and CSBAG, the Senior Leader at URA, and all the senior people in the room, ladies and gentlemen, and all the viewers on the televisions. I'm going to talk about the budget priorities for 2021, as well as the post-COVID fiscal stimulus options, which could be available. But I know, like the PS said, this is a period when we are engaging in a lot of conversations around this. I'm also involved in a number of processes. So I'll be mindful of those processes. And I'm going to speak about three key things. First, the COVID budget priorities, the pre-COVID budget priorities. Before the COVID came, what were the priorities in the budget? I will then speak a little bit on what I think should be really focused on in the highly awaited fiscal stimulus, and then a few guidelines which I think are grounded in economics on how the policymakers can attend to this. Now, before COVID hit us, the budget had been designed around 5 key priorities. The first one was agro-processing and light manufacturing. The second one was on mineral beneficiation, oil and gas, tourism, as well as research and development, scientific research and innovation. The third objective or priority was on, again, in line with the longer-term vision of the government on building infrastructure, but this time putting more emphasis on rural economic development. And then the fourth one was on improving social services and balancing opportunities across the regions, because the economy of Uganda and most of the opportunities tend to concentrate here in the center. So the designers of this budget were mindful of the need to achieve some spatial efficiency by getting opportunities redistributed across the country. And lastly, enhancing governance and sustaining peace and security. Now, when I look at the budget, the 45.5 trillion shilling budget, it is quite heavy on the longer term vision of the country, and especially facilitating what we call the enablers of growth and development. Infrastructure, steel, works and transport got the lion's share of this budget. security jumped up a lot, up to around 4.4 trillion shillings. We had education, very good, increasing to about 3.4 trillion shillings, and health as well as energy. But now, when you look at what is happening today and what is likely to play out as the PSST has been telling us, you see that the future beginning tomorrow is more focused on the yoke. You know, when the designers of the development plan were beginning the planning in around 2010, they used the analogy of an egg. And they said they are going to invest in the development of Uganda in line with the way the egg is made to eventually hatch. You know, the egg has the outer layer which is protecting everything inside, and that is the security. It also has these other government expenditures which are needed to have the state work more effectively. But also they talked of the inner piece of the egg, which we call the yolk, and that's where the growth comes from. And now we are not necessarily looking even at growth, but recovery. How do we recover? So in this case, therefore, Mr. PSST and your team, I would really need to focus you on how do we get this budget rethought and reallocated and rationalized in such a way that the areas which have not been at the forefront of government public investment, areas like ICT. When I check here, ICT was allocated about 167 billion. When you look at trade and industry, was allocated 172 billion. When you look at tourism, 194 billion. Social development, 184. And then housing, about 200 billion. So these are the drivers which I thought now with the COVID, they need to be looked at, and we see how we reallocate this budget to give them some more money. Not forgetting the main driver of this economy, which is going to support the bounce back, and to me that is agriculture. How do we get agriculture to work more effectively? I know the resources have increased, but a little bit later I'm going to show you where the problem perhaps could be. As we speak, these reallocations and so on, we know that COVID has paralyzed one fiscal hand. You know, government has two fiscal hands. One is taking away, and another one is giving. So the one which is supposed to take away from us is a bit paralyzed. A number of tax policy measures in the budget under the highly anticipated domestic revenue mobilization strategy could face serious implementation challenges. These include rental income, which we thought was going to play a big role, alternative minimum tax on loss declaring businesses. We thought we would now tame those people who have been declaring losses perpetually by getting some money from them, but now I anticipate you might find that a big chunk of the businesses, they are going to be making losses. And then the new taxes for small and medium enterprises. We had put together a strategy of incentivizing these firms to formalize by taxing those which haven't kept books of accounts a little higher than those who have books of accounts. Now, among others, these I think we need now to revisit them before we put a lot of pressure on the Uganda Revenue Authority, because I want to tell you the truth, we don't have a lot of money this time to give to government. And yet we want money from government. And I'm going to show you how that kind of challenge can be overcome. Now, the highly awaited fiscal stimulus. I won't go into the conventional fiscal playbook. However, I think government needs to pronounce itself on the following. Number one, we need, and it's good you have hinted on it, we need special interventions to support informal economy workers. These are groups which we tend to give more, we are so heavy on rhetoric, but quite light on action in supporting them. And yet, they hold a big chunk of the economy of Uganda, the informal workers. We need direct support to firms, even those which are formal and big enough to keep workers on payroll to save jobs. This is something which I haven't had enough conversation going on how do we support the firms right from corporations and see which subsidies do we use to get them keep workers. And some of these subsidies could be actually self-financing in a way, if you design them using good economic models. We need also direct credit support to the SACCOs, village savings and loan associations, as well as microfinance institutions to finance these SMEs. But this time, as the word direct means, this is money which should go direct to these groups and not have a conduit through the formal structures which sometimes they tend to bring in the leaky bucket challenge. Mr. PSST, we need to listen to the less represented voices a little bit more, because I think we are hearing them, but we are not listening to them. I think that these less represented voices I've talked about here, they are the nucleus of the economy of Uganda. And unfortunately, they're not represented by these powerful interest groups that you meet regularly and your political supervisors. And these are the informal workers, the SMEs, and those other people who are vulnerable. Now, the support to agriculture should use a value chain approach. I think government, this is the time you should stop the loop-sided funding of the sector. When I analyzed the budget you are going to implement, 49% of that budget, which is intended for agriculture in all sectors, 49% of it is going to production, 23% to enabling environment, writing policies and so on, 21% research, only 2% for processing and value addition, and 5% for marketing. I know that private sector plays partly a role, private sector finance, in funding the other two segments of the value chain, processing and marketing, but still a very big problem to get growth capital. The working capital in Uganda is not enough to get us out of this COVID challenge. We need growth capital, and growth capital can only come from the state. I would also want to encourage those who are putting together the stimulus and all these other interventions to use the NDP3 as the playbook. We need to align the budget with the COVID-adjusted NDP3 programs, because I understand the NPA has taken trouble to adjust the programs and the plans they had made to the COVID challenge, as well as those interventions, especially those which are rich in employment, like agro-industry, light manufacturing, and others with high output and labor multipliers. We should restrict impulse spending. Impulse spending may lead us to misguided and subsequently regretted departure from pre-committed longer-term goals. And in periods of disaster, there are a lot of forces to engage in impulse spending. We need also the fiscal stimulus plan not to displace effective private sector efforts, lest it creates a moral hazard. We need to support the needy more than supporting those who are more able to get their own capital. In my view, that would help us to get a fiscal stimulus which is pro-recovery. As I conclude, the post-COVID-19 stimulus, fiscal stimulus options, to me, they need to also follow some of the kind of wisdom we have gotten from the past. John Keynes, when he was writing about how to pay for the war, in 1940, and the COVID is synonymous with the war, as the president told us, he said that when you are fighting economic downturn of this nature, there are 7 guidelines to policymakers which they should take keen interest in. Number 1, you need to know your economy beyond macro. We need to ask ourselves today, which sectors need to be prioritized in terms of the employment and output multipliers. It's very, very critical. Secondly, Keynes advised us to use existing mechanisms as much as possible. Let us not create new mechanisms of taking the stimulus to the people. Existing mechanisms should be leveraged as much as possible. We need to invent new programs only when it's necessary. Enlist the private sector as much as possible. The private sector knows very much how to use money than government. Government knows more how to waste money, in my view. So we need to enlist the private sector as much as possible, diversify, and do not fear duplication or unintended winners in the response. Let us not fear, Mr. PSST and your team, to get unintended winners, as long as we are really focusing on getting this economy back to working and then running later. We need to ensure that the response is dynamic and persistent. And lastly, which is very, very important for me, better do too much than doing too little. So I know some people are worried about the debt. You know, when you are fighting recession and war, the first major culprit is going to be the debt. We are going to borrow some money, so I would encourage Uganda to borrow some money, as long as that money is negotiated carefully and invested in a very appropriate manner. Finally, we need also to remember what has been failing implementation in Uganda. We always put together good plans, but we fail to implement them. Last year we did a research, which actually I got the honor to speak to you.
Keith, I won't waste your time. Please, you have a few minutes to respond, and then we'll open this up to a panel discussion. Over to you, PSST.
I thought my opening remarks I had responded.
There might be some new measures.
But let me do this. First of all, I want to thank the keynote speaker, Ramadan. I think it was a great speech. I think the consensus now, to all of us, that on the impact of these problems we are facing. And I think we shouldn't waste a lot of time there. And I was happy that you concentrated on the solutions. And I think time has come for us. We are not in March, April. We are now where we are. We do clearly know the impact, to a great extent. Of course, we must remember, and I agree with you, that analysis must be continuous, because what you face this month under this problem, the next month is a completely changed world. So projections and all this is very hard. So in that respect, I agree with you that we should concentrate on the solutions. Now let me do a thing. First, as I said, and I agree with you that we need to do budget reallocations, taking into account revenue shortage and also the priorities that have emerged as a result of these crises. We cannot run away from them. And at the same time, take into account already commitments. But let me also do this. And I think that's why we kept quiet for some time, so that things could settle down and start reasoning together. And when we were behind the reins working a lot of work, and I want to thank my staff, I want to thank the private sector and everybody. If you see the papers which have been generated and work done, it has been great. I have never seen this. Surprisingly, when all of us thought we were on holiday, people were working incredible, if you see the papers we have. And therefore, we have enough research work as this is to respond, to know the problem we are facing, but also to think about the solutions. But as we discuss, we need to understand, to know, I think, two things. One is that the fiscal space is almost zero. And that is not Uganda alone, it is across African countries. While Europe, USA and Japan and the rest, China and India, because these are big economies, could, for example, afford to what they call, I think, quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is actually printing money, isn't it? You print money to get the economy going. A question I asked, and which we need to discuss, for example, can we do printing of money, which I see all over people talking about, without catalyzing inflation, without catalyzing exchange rate depreciation, and therefore all this feeding back into the system? For us, in our analysis, given what we faced in the 70s and 80s, the one thing we fear most, and some people have criticized us, is that what we saw, for example, in 1980-something, was it 84 or 83? The then government, I think it was 84, the then government printed money and gave us, I think it was in the first election, and gave us salary increases. Did it work? No. Because all the benefits we were to get in salary increases were all wiped out. We became worse by inflation. And so that route, yes, we can look at it. Yes, we are working with Bank of Uganda to look at it, but let us know that priority number one must be macroeconomic stability. Because you may think that you are helping the poor, the impact of inflation wipes it completely off. And I think that one we should take it into account. Two is, of course, borrowing. Yes, we are borrowing. But is the space still there for borrowing? I wonder. And when I'm talking from the Treasury, listen to me. By the way, I should also say Uganda is in a much better situation than most African countries on these issues I'm talking about. So when you are thinking about it, in these African countries, that's why we are very careful not to pronounce earlier on impulse, which you talked about, which I think was a good point. Impulse. You say, okay, Europe has done this social protection, blah, 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 all these things. Can we do them? That's number one. Two, if you borrow and get and do them, or print money, whatever, I don't know, can you sustain them? Because that is another question one needs to take into account. And I think that's, fortunately, we are out of the impasse. I think all of us have gone down to start discussing on this. And I agree with the presenter. Now, the next one, which I want to talk about, reallocations. What is the room available to us to do reallocations. The problem is, and many people fail to see it, and when I talk about many people, let me talk about Africa, not Uganda. I need, as you know, I've had enough quarrels. I hope my brother, the minister, is listening to me, listening to us. Is that okay? I understand that the people are not listening. The people on virtual are not listening to me. Maybe let me remove this one. Now, the reallocations. To what extent can we do reallocations? There is a need for reallocations, but to what extent can we do reallocations? Now, that's where we call budget flexibility. While all this money we are getting and whatever, budget revenue has been increasing, forget about the short-term interest. Budget expenditure flexibility has been unfortunately going down. Why? Because in the past, many years ago, we were only in cham-cham, as they call it, small traveling abroad and whatever. Today, that flexibility in your allocation is almost zero. Why? Because we have already contracted multi-year programs. So if you say you are relocating to give Tom, you are taking away from Ramadan because you are supposed to pay him. So the question is, there is a question here, should I take away from Ramadan who supplied goods to government and give away the social protection of these other people, which is also necessary? I think there is a trade-off there that we need to discuss on that matter. And then, in some of these in the past, government of Uganda was, and indeed Africa, financing the budgets through what we call accumulation of domestic areas. Actually, the room of domestic areas, that room has completely narrowed, because we are doing it when nobody was enforcing their, what do you call it, rights, legal rights in courts and everywhere. Today, if you don't pay people on time, you are not saving anything. In fact, maybe even in some cases high, because interest rates is higher than if you go borrow and pay. Because now, certificates like in roads and all these dams and carry interest rate if you don't pay it on time. People who we, in the past, were not paying for a long period, now all of them go to court and you get higher impact. So the room for flexibility in reallocations also seems to be very narrow. Yes, it will be there, but we need to look at solutions to all this. Fiscal stimulus, you said we talk more about this. We were looking, we are still working with Bank of Uganda. I think Bank of Uganda announced measures, but the private sector came and said these are not enough. And therefore, that's why we have a meeting of this afternoon to discuss with the Bank of Uganda what is it from monetary policy, the governor, and ourselves, can we put more if we can, as I said on that one. And now, I also want to say that the financing in agriculture is on agriculture productivity. Sorry, value addition, agro-processing is so crucial, because currently now, in our analysis, our majority of people are in the rural areas. Now, try to take social protection there. Uganda is a different world compared to others. Before you deal with marketing their goods, you are not helping them. First, you must must make sure they sell their goods. And to sell their goods, as we see, where we have reached, however poor agriculture needs a lot of agro-processing. But we are doing this through agriculture guarantee scheme, which is not in the agriculture allocation, and the money which we are mobilizing from donors through UDB to deal with that one. I just want to make that point. We are focusing on it, in fact, as priority number one. And I think at this stage we are about to get resources to that effect. So that one we are prioritizing because we know we need to get the peasants or whatever to get the agriculture. And in fact, if you see, a number of agriculture prices have been dramatically affected during this COVID problem. Maybe there is also in a number of areas. And people are crying, they want their goods to be sold. And I think it's important that we don't go in Paris, which you talked about, and do thing. I will leave the revenue side, what's going on, to the commissioner here, who is here. At this stage, let me listen, because I think it's very important, and I've warned all my staff. This is a time we must listen to everybody as we try to get solutions together. Thank you very much. I should add one thing. We have committed ourselves to budget transparency during this process. We have said a big contract must be publicized. The biggest, but we want to work with everybody to ensure that the resources we use are effective. And I think this is, in any case, I think our budget has been already transparent, but we want to enhance that process. Because I think now we are in a strong position, given this crisis, thanks to that point you made, to deal with this. We are in an incredibly strong position, all of us together, to fight and deal with those problems so that we get value for money on all these resources which are available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Keith. Keith, there were several questions while you were speaking that kept coming up. I'm not so sure how much time we have of yours here.
Go ahead. I'd rather do them now.
Very quickly, I want to begin with where you ended, with some message of hope. Jonathan Gordon said, what sort of hope can you give Ugandans? Because all you're saying is almost predicting doom to the economy. He was looking for some hope in your message. Moses Mukundane says government should avoid this impulse spending. You have spoken to it because it has potential to jeopardize the early prioritized national expenditure. Robert Kakuru from Kabale, how does the budget intend to mitigate supplementary expenditure, which the tendencies of supplementary expenditure which frustrate service delivery? And just one other short question, your PSST. Specific interventions for the urban poor. Keith, we'll end there.
Okay. Yes. I've been careful not to go to the specific interventions because that would be preempting the speech of the minister and the president. And I think that's indiscipline. They are coming, it's 1 week or so, but let's see what more we can put in their speeches before they come. Because I think it's not good for me, from policy making, to preempt what the president and the minister are going to announce in those details. But we can discuss what are areas which we can do. But suffice to say that I have already said that the urban poor, we are looking at it, and I think that's the meetings which we are in. But let me leave this to the minister and the president. But I think we should discuss whatever we can take from here into what they are going to announce. Thank you.
Keith, how much hope can you give those who are watching us?
I think that
I know you're changing. You've just mentioned in your remarks.
First of all, looking through what was going on through in January. In March, April, even early May, and where we are now. It seems, by the way, I should say that we are in much better position than we thought. I thought at that time the economy was going to grow by minuses. But of course, the solutions are all together with us. I was putting all this to understand that the solutions which are coming and the context of this situation. Of course, for example, we got the money from, we want to get money from, we're waiting for Parliament to approve a loan from World Bank, a loan from IMF, and we have negotiated them already, subject to Parliament approving. I don't know what they will approve. That's the power you give them in the Constitution. But in there, we are looking at supporting microcredits to even the other urban poor. We are looking at the, and that's what we're going to discuss with the governor, because I think the number of suggestions came the other day. Is it possible, for example, like the loan repayment, which was given, the private sector said this is not enough. We need much more. We need much more tax exemption measures. We need much more on this. So, and those are still under discussions, but I think they are coming. There is hope.
Yes.
But the hope should come in the context that we should also be very careful as we open the country, that the disease doesn't become a big problem.
All right. I have several interests, one including something around tax. You talked about the tax measures. You have a 3 trillion tax debt sitting on that man's neck there, Commissioner Kateshumbwa. And many are wondering whether if you began by removing, for example, the interest and the penalties, that would be a good start, so that those who actually have this debt can come and pay quickly because these penalties and interest has been withdrawn.
So you are saying we take away the penalties?
Yes, penalties and interest, so that the principal can actually be paid. And I'm sure the debtors will come running to pay the principal.
Okay. But yes, we shall do it. We are going to recommend to the minister to do this, but subject to one thing. You know, people here cannot go with it. That in the future you will not get involved in. Okay, but I'll take it.
I see you are going to commit. All right, but that's good enough, Keith. Keith, the question on.
I think my staff take that one. I think it's a good proposal.
Director Musisi, I'll also follow up on that one. I have interests there. Keith, the issue around government credit. If businesses supply government, how long should they wait for you to pay?
First of all, I think we committed ourselves to ensure that when somebody is surprised, he should be paid on time. Why? Because, and I think that people in the government should listen to this, because when you delay, that person has taken a loan. Businesses are run on loans. When you don't pay on time, interest is running. And therefore, we are the biggest, in the past government has been the biggest destroyer of enterprises. And therefore, for the future, and I hope my bosses are listening, parliamentarians, ministers, and everybody should understand that the biggest destroyer of the enterprises actually is government if it does not pay on time. Mark my time. Because businesses are run on credit. And therefore, our proposal is that we shouldn't overcommit ourselves every year beyond a certain level so that the neighbors pay on time. That's number one. Number two, the other reason why we don't pay on time, there are three. One is overcommitment by government. Two, and there is a lot of overcommitment that is going on. Don't ask me where they come from. You know them. I mean, what do I do when I say next year there will be no money for starting cities and you create cities? That's an overcommitment, whether you have mechanisms or not. When you create, we have now today over 700 new entities created without budget. Can you imagine? So it's important that we listen to the fiscal constraint. The problem is people in the government, all of us in the government, including myself, tend to pretend as if there is no fiscal constraint. At any time, there is a budget constraint, a resource constraint. And we must discipline ourselves to that one if we must not destroy the economy. The other one, of course, has been corruption. The third one is also an animal called supplementary expenditures. Where do they come from? Minister of Finance and the government. But for God's sake, the budget, at the time Minister presents a budget, he presents a balanced budget. Now, when you give a supplementary, it means you have cut somebody who probably has already committed that resources. That's number one. Number two, look at the current budget. I said I'm a man of peace nowadays, but I hope members of parliament are listening to me. The minister presented a balanced budget. You removed tax measures, but you didn't cut the expenditure. So already, we are already in a situation before we start the budget whereby some areas will have to be carry areas. You see what I mean? Because you have revenue was cut and the expenditure was not cut. And they say Secretary of Treasury manages this with your team on a cash basis. What? It's a problem. So these are the areas we must tackle as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Keith, the big question, and I'm sure all the others who are here and are servers with NSSF, is the question of NSSF, sir. Based on the conversation that is going on with the joint parliamentary committees and the unions and workers, the issue of the 20% access to midterm.
No, my understanding is that it was the Minister of Finance and NSSF which made a proposal of midterm. The problem is not midterm, because the midterm has to say that if you have worked like 10 years,
Yes. In fact, it was 15.
you have reached 45,
Yes.
you can take 20%. That one came from us. The problem is, if you give 20% everybody today, now remember, we need to sober down. Essentially, one of the biggest points made by Ramadan.
Keith, closer to your microphone, because I'm sure everyone is interested in
one
this
of the
one.
biggest points made today, which many people don't realize, is that we should be very careful about impulse, and I agree with him, impulse expenditures or decisions. So the question is, if today you say 20% everybody be paid, the need is there. Nobody doubts the need, please. But the question is NSSF today capable of paying that money? Because all the money they get, they invest it on a long-term basis. So, can you sell the assets? And I think that capacity should be first assessed to see where it's possible for NSSF to pay 20% cash. And because if tomorrow you say so, they will be aligned on the NSSF. Do they have the cash to pay that money? And if not, shouldn't we look at it in a more sober way? Because it's destroying the savings, which we have been, the cleanup and the process which we have done on NSSF can be very dangerous. People in the future may not think. So we are not opposed to 20%, but we are saying, is it possible to do it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. We really have to let you go. I know you're very busy, so I will allow you.
I have able staff.
I know the directors and the commissioners are here, so we are safe. But your team, I don't know whether they wanted us to officially record this. Shaka, he had already launched the budget month. But Arthur, if you stop keeping the PSST busy. Okay. PSST, I humbly request, I think the cameras now are rolling. Your team was not very ready. They are bringing the board. Please bring the board. We want you to officially launch with the board. So the team is bringing the board. You're launching the budget month. So the team will bring the board in front here. And Keith, you will autograph and pen your signature to this board, which signifies the official launch. Shaka, I think bring it to the middle. Let's have it here in the middle. There you go. So we are going to officially launch the National Budget Month, financial year 2020-2021. Yes. So Keith, please go ahead. You'll need to give him, do you have a marker for him so that he officially pens his signature? No, there's a marker. Do you have a marker? You use a pen. Okay. Can we hold? Yes. There you go, the PSST, Keith Mwakanizi. Thank you very much. Officially launching the National Budget Month, financial year 2020-2021, witnessed, of course, by the partners, ACODE and CSBAG, plus our tax collector, the Commissioner of Domestic Taxes. All right, thank you very much, Keith. Keith, now you're allowed to leave. Okay, so Arthur, as you see Keith away, allow me invite our panelists who will make their way to the front for this discussion. Doctor, please do come and take one of the seats at the front here. And I'll also ask Mr. Mugabi from UN Women to join the team. Enoch Mugabi, the program specialist, UN Women, who's here representing the UN Women country representative. And we also have Clara Mira, who is joining us via Zoom. She's available online. And Dr. Eli Karuhanga, who's also online, but also Mr. Kateshumbwa Dixon, the Commissioner of Domestic Taxes, and Reverend Canon Dr. John Senyonyi, who is the Vice Chancellor, Uganda Christian University. Feel free, Doctor. You have the middle seat, I think. They want you to have the middle seat. All right, so we will have a very short conversation. Each of these four panelists here, including Clara, who is online, and Eli Karuhanga, will have 5 minutes to delve into a specific question that I will be asking them. And I wanted to begin with you, Kateshumbwa. And not many people, and feel free to remove the mask while you're speaking to us, not many people would want to be in your position, given the crisis we're in and the targets you face at URA to collect the taxes that will feed into the PSST's budget and the different interventions he has mentioned. So to you, we are looking at the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on the tax revenue projections. Over to you, Mr. Kateshumbwa.
Thank you very much, moderator, and all the panelists. We have had very good speech from the keynote speaker and the PSST. First of all, just to give a highlight on the impact of this pandemic on revenue. What we have witnessed in the last 3 months, I think has never been witnessed in the history of, in the recent history of URA, because at the moment, the last month of April, we saw a decline in revenue of collected about 60% of what was expected to be collected. And the previous month of March, when the lockdown started, we were short by up to about 84%. We collected less by about 276 billion, while April about 638 billion. Now, why, if you look at the performance of exports, on average in the last 3 months, we have seen a decline of about 25.3%. And these are the formal exports that go through the borders. But this does not include what I would like to call the informal cross-border trade that is not documented. Most of our communities along our neighbors do a lot of trade. So if you are looking at the impact in terms of the common man for the exports, the impact is much bigger because people are not able to cross. If you look at the imports, again, a drop of about 26% continuously since the lockdown started. And for the imports in particular, you will recall that the biggest trading partner for us, the source of imports, is China. And this pandemic started just during or after the Chinese New Year holiday had started. That is the time when we experienced drop in the imports. So already there was that drop being experienced. The pandemic came in and we saw the imports drop by 26%. But when you look at the imports, particularly from China, the impact is beyond the consumables, if I may say, because we have industries which were setting up locally and which were importing machinery. But all their plans have also been impacted because machinery could not come as well as expertise to come and install. So that also affects the production locally. Now, this is the situation we have. And as the PSST has mentioned, the next year, a very huge target for us to correct, but with very little supporting policy measures that were cut in Parliament. So what does that mean? We must find a gap to fill, because if you are going to meet the expenditure requirements by government through revenue, then we have to look internally for the solutions. In this period, what we have tried to do for the public, for the business community, is try and be flexible on certain aspects that are within our control. For example, extending grace period for payments, for filing. Many companies have been writing, requesting us to allow them to pay later, which we have done, and also not imposing penalties for late payments. We have also been trying to extend warehousing periods for the goods which are coming in. We negotiated with the Kenya Port Authority to try and allow more time for the cargo as it came. We have suspended auction, and we have also automated certain aspects for getting services in URA to make sure that we ease the process and fast track support. Now, amidst this, I want to appreciate the taxpayers. Last month, we collected about 690 billion. We were short by around 630. And this was a whole month of lockdown. And while we were on duty, the entire URA staff, and I also want to appreciate the staff at the borders because they are also working very hard, mindful of security to facilitate trade, but also in mobilizing. We suspended certain activities like audits because we are not able to reach to the clients because of the lockdown. But amidst all that, there are taxpayers who have continued to fulfill their obligations, and we do really appreciate. To collect 690 billion in a lockdown month is quite a big effort. What does this mean? We are using this period to study the data that we have. And as we study the data, we recognize that some of our taxpayers have had some gaps. And so we are reaching out to them to ask them to give them an opportunity to disclose. So if you have not been paying tax and you have made some profits over the years and you have not paid, this is the time for you to support the economy, because the economy must continue running. And we must support the sectors which are struggling. So while the taxes like presumptive tax is doing very badly because of the lockdown, there are sectors like the beverage industry, which is producing water, soft drinks. They are performing, and we are encouraging those sectors to be compliant and ensure that they meet their obligations. If you are collecting VAT from the consumer, it is your obligation to declare it. If you have collected pay as you earn from someone, declare it. So we are encouraging taxpayers to be compliant by reaching out to them, by showing them the gaps they have, so that they come out voluntarily, so that we don't have to exercise the stick. And so we think that this is the approach we are going to continue as a strategy in the coming months. And we really want to appeal to the taxpayers. The heart that we have seen people showing in donating, in reaching out to government, that heart should be extended to compliance with the tax requirements. It does not help for you to come on the cameras, you donate all sorts of things, but then when you go back, you are cooking the books, because you might be denying the country much more than you're actually showing. So we want to appreciate those who are coming forward, and we are ready to support, to listen, to understand, and work out arrangements to enable people to pay. Finally, my senior, the PSST, has mentioned we've been working with the private sector and the Ministry of Finance to develop and advise our principals on some of the measures that might need to be taken, and we are also looking forward to the speech from the Minister or the President on the measures that might be taken. I think for now I can stop here.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We really want to applaud you at URA, and you did make quite some great revelations on the collections for last month. I am not so sure if the journalists in this room will find the room for all the headlines that have been given to you today. We hope you can. I want to move to Clara. I don't know if Clara Mira, you can hear me. Clara, the reason we want to do that is we are sure our internet connection may not be so perfect. But I wanted to come to you, Clara Mira, the IMF resident representative. You're trying to make a case on making Uganda's COVID-19 economic stimulus inclusive. Over to you, Clara. Under 4 minutes, Clara.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, and this has been a really interesting debate. And thanks so much for the keynote presentation and the opening remarks and everything. I think, as the PS said, we know what the problem is, but just real quick, the recent work that we've done does show the impact on the economy of COVID-19, with growth projected to more than half, most likely from the 6 that we had projected. So going to most likely below 3 because of what we know, all the supply side disruptions, the sharp decline in external demand and in domestic demand, a sharp decline in remittances and foreign direct investment, etc. So all of this is expected to take a large toll on growth, and with the sectors more affected, including services, tourism, hospitality, manufacturing, construction, agriculture. And the social impact side is also expected to be very large. We've heard that poverty could increase by as much as 2.6 million people, and this could really threaten Uganda's impressive strides in poverty reduction over the last decade. And the informal sector, the refugees, the women, they are particularly vulnerable. So the social protection and the targeted interventions are very critical. It has already been mentioned that, of course, the fiscal accounts are also going to suffer. Why? Because we are going to have less revenue, lower revenue, because of lower growth. So companies have just less benefits on which to pay taxes. And also some of the stimulus measures are likely to affect revenue collection. And then there will be an increase in expenditures, and this is reasonable and it's expected. So the fiscal accounts are also going to be affected, as has been mentioned, and the external accounts. So what needs to be done? Clearly, number one is to strengthen the healthcare systems, which most countries in the world have been doing, and Uganda as well. And the second one, which is what we are discussing here today, is how do we limit the propagation of this health crisis into economic activity? And I think there we really need to shield people and firms affected by the measures, by the containment measures, also minimize the persistent damaging effects from the unavoidable severe slowdown, and ensure that the recovery, when it comes, can begin quickly once the pandemic is under control. So the measures that can be used are fiscal, monetary, and financial sector, all of these. What we think is that the impacts, the measures need to be most likely large, timely, temporary, and targeted as well. So this means that the measures should really focus on how to alleviate liquidity constraints. They should be targeted, to households and companies to ensure that they can maintain the basic needs and the basic operations and prevent layoffs and exits from the supply chain. When we talk about targeting, this can also be very effective because the propensity to consume is typically higher for the most vulnerable. So when the most vulnerable are targeted, this benefits the economy in two ways. It benefits the most vulnerable, and also they will consume and increase domestic demand more. So we also think that measures should be progressive, so they should benefit more those who need it more, and of course, cost effective. So some of the measures that have been taken in other countries and some of the measures that are being considered here that are useful include on the revenue side, temporary tax and custom exemptions, for example, on health products and services, temporary tax relief, so reducing some rates on turnover and payroll taxes, extending the tax deadlines, as has just been mentioned, and and making the value-added refunds faster for affected sectors and vulnerable firms. So that's on the revenue side. The other very important part is arrears. So it's important not to incur in more arrears, so prevent arrears accumulation, because this would compound the problem for the private sector. So this would amplify the cash flow and the liquidity problems that companies are having. So this is very critical. And we understand that government here is considering actually repaying more past arrears than originally planned, which is a good way to putting back resources to the economy and boosting demand. Then public sector support. So when you have liquidity problems in specific sectors and specific companies, many governments are providing cash flow support in the forms of loans, umbrella guarantees, or other measures for particularly hard-hit sectors. So this can come with conditions, and this can help companies preserve employment and preserve wages. So of course, this should be done transparently and ensuring good governance. In Uganda, we understand that some of the thinking is using some resources channeled through Uganda Development Bank to provide access to affordable financing to companies that are experiencing difficulties. Now, the other very important part comes in terms of cash transfers. So what we've been thinking, and in line with what has been mentioned also before, is that it's important to scale up what already exists in terms of facilitating access to social programs. And cash transfers could be a very good way to provide a minimum necessary for companies and for households that are really struggling. So it would help them, and it would also increase aggregate demand, as has been mentioned. This is particularly useful for countries like Uganda with large informal sectors. So if we have information and we can use digital payments and all the new technologies that are out there to target these companies and these families, this would be a very useful way to cushion the impact on the small and medium-sized enterprises and the informal sector. And we understand that there is work ongoing, which we think it's very useful. Then you have measures on the financial sector side. Sorry?
Yes, very quickly, in 30 seconds.
So go ahead. Just very quickly, okay, yes. So I was saying, so on the financial sector side, there are also measures. So BOU has reduced monetary policy, and then some measures that also other countries have adopted include loan restructurings and provision of liquidity, credit guarantees. We think this is all very necessary. And we see that other countries in the region had adopted these measures, revenue measures, and measures on cash transfers and wage subsidies, in-kind transfers, etc. So by the way, just a reference to the fact that we have been compiling at the IMF all the policy responses that countries have put together, and everything is publicly available in our website. So if you are interested in imf.org, once you log in there, it says policy tracker. So we have 193 economies updated every 2 weeks on what they've done. So I think these are good ideas also. And then maybe real quick, my last point is how do we finance all of this? Because this has been coming up and down. And I think what matters also for next year's budget is that indeed we need to reprioritize some existing expenditures so that unfortunately we cannot do business as usual as if there was no COVID. So just looking into what is non-priority expenditure that can be delayed and that could start later without a significant growth impact, because this is very important. The economy also needs support. And the last point is that to finance the response, international solidarity is also very critical. So the ability of the countries to respond requires external financing. This is very critical also because the global capital markets and the global markets are very disrupted. And this is the reason why we at the IMF have also put at the disposal of Uganda an emergency financing line so that these resources can be used to finance the response to COVID. Let me stop here, sorry.
Thank you very much, Clara. Just in 30 seconds, if you can, we've been hearing a discussion on debt cancellation versus the conversation we had with both Keith here and Ramadan on renegotiating the loans. I'm sure you would want to comment on that.
I think an initiative that has been put forward, available to Uganda and to many other countries, is to suspend the payments of debt between May and December. So this would be all the bilateral debt that Uganda owes, both the interest and the principal would be suspended till next year. So that can be a good idea to create more space. But real quick on that, I agree with what has been mentioned before, that as of now, the real critical thing is to make sure that we support both the lives and the livelihoods of Ugandans, and then that debt sustainability considerations are really more something to really look at in the medium term. Though having said that, Uganda is at low risk of distress, so it is indeed doing better than many other countries.
All right, many thanks, Clara. I also know now we have the chair of the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, Dr. Eli Karuhanga. Doctor, we really have run out of time. If I give you 3 minutes, I really would like you in 3 minutes to help us discuss the interventions for alleviating the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic for the businesses in Uganda. Doctor?
Maurice, we have, as private sector, had a lot of meetings with the Minister of Finance and with the Secretary of the Treasury in particular, and the Minister, also with the Prime Minister. We have prepared a huge document which we have discussed with them, and they have discussed it in Cabinet on Monday. We are all anxiously waiting to hear whether our views will be taken or some of them thrown out. We have also looked at what Kenya has done in particular, and we have shared those Kenyan moves with the Right Honorable Prime Minister. What we really want to get to understand is that the way we've been doing and managing the budget, and even the process leading up to the budget conclusion, has to be reviewed. And also the way the government operates, with the Minister of Planning and Minister of Finance working where the treasurer is the planner, is the executor, is the accountant general. This thing has a bit of conflict. I want to get more serious involvement of the private sector in these things. And it's coming. I'm very happy that the budget process actually has been evolving very well, including Parliament. And Parliament has been playing a very good role lately. So basically, I am not disturbed. But with this arrival of this pandemic, the budget, what had been prepared as a budget, we think we'll have to change. And I'm glad that they have taken our views, and I'm very anxiously waiting for the announcement this week from government.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eli Garuhanga, the chair of the Private Sector Foundation Uganda. So I'll now come here to you, Dr. Canon Dr. John Senyonyi. I want you to take us through this COVID-19 pandemic impact on the education sector here in Uganda, especially for you in the private institutions.
Thank you very much.
Your microphone, yes. Keep it around 3 minutes. I'll be happy, sir.
Thank you very much for that. I actually feel very privileged that for the first time, higher education institutions are being called upon, particularly the private ones, to be able to say something before the budget. We've been asking for this for a very long time, and I wish that in the coming years it can be done much earlier than this. Now, I think I want to say, first and foremost, why education? Because many people do not understand the value of education as an investment. The truth of the matter is all of us are here because we're educated, isn't it? And if you don't educate economists, if you don't educate all these other people, if you don't invest in it, then you are not actually doing enough for the country. Of course, the difficulty is that higher education, or education as such, is a long-term investment. And quite often we tend to think that the only things we want to focus on are those that will bring money very quickly. Now, coming from there, then I come to the private sector, because you gave me just 3 minutes. I want to say, by the way, that I did write up all this in about 6 or 7 pages, which I've already sent to His Excellency the President as well as the Minister of Education. And so there's a lot more that I have said in that than I'm able to say here. One of the biggest challenges that I know for us in the private subsector of higher education is that a lot of the pronouncements and directives and so on are actually focused on public universities, and somehow there is an assumption that whatever pertains in the public universities will actually work in the private universities. Secondly, there is also a failure to recognize that universities should be given their space. There is what is called institutional autonomy, which is an internationally recognized principle. And so there is a sense in which I think we are completely failing to understand where education comes in. And many times as private institutions, we tend to think that actually government comes to us for taxes. They don't come to us to give us anything. I have increasingly now run away from talking about the subventions or whatever money government gives as government money. It's taxpayer money. Now, the truth of the matter is we too are taxpayers, so are our parents, so is everyone that brings children to the private institutions. And yet in the end, we do not get a cut of the cake. And that to me, I think, is an anomaly that needs to be put right. I need to say that one of the things that for us we are very keen on, I can't say each and everything that we've said in the paper that I sent out, but one of the things that we've said very strongly is the importance of understanding that the methodologies, the pedagogical methodologies we've been using are becoming archaic. They are no longer applicable. Now all universities are actually internationally are going online. And instead in Uganda we are being told you don't do online. There is no contact whatsoever. As I may be controversial in that, but I want to believe that that is a very important thing. And I think what COVID has done is to expose the fragile traditional methodologies. And there is also the assumption that when students sit in class, that then they are learning. I think the only thing that we need to do now is to strengthen our ICT technologies, whether we like it or not. At Uganda Christian University, we already have an e-learning lab. It's well equipped, it's ready to go, and we can communicate with the students irrespective of where they are. And we can be able to teach them wherever they are. But unfortunately, these are things that are not very well understood. And so my appeal would be that as government considers financing the ICT technologies, they should be looking at the private institutions as well. To equip them now is to enable them then deal with any crisis that may come in future. And so that, I think, will be very critical for us. Now, I do realize that at this particular point, COVID-19 is going to paralyze these private education institutions. I think some of that has been implicit in what the keynote speaker and what the PSST did say. Because many of these institutions are actually running on loans. And those loans, right now, we're already breaching. I remember we wrote to one of our debtors, one of our creditors rather, and we say to them, please give us until December. And what did they say? And they are not exactly very happy that we can do that. But that's the reality. And most universities, most private institutions, just like we talk about other businesses, and quite often when we talk about businesses, we forget that these are also businesses. Many of them, like for us, we are not for profit, but there is a sense in which there is a failure to understand what can be done for many of these institutions. But they are going to be paralyzed, and it's going to be a difficult one. We are waiting for students, but will the students be able to pay? And if they are not able to pay, will our friends from URA, for example, come and say, pay up? How much time are they going to give us? Are the banks going to come back to us and say, pay up? So what can the government do? I do think that one of the things that is very critical, and I heard a little bit, you are talking about interest and penalties. For us as universities, we have already advocated we need a tax holiday for at least a year. Some of them are even saying for 2 years. We do need a tax holiday. Now, I know that government wants money, but the truth of the matter is, if government comes to us and demands that these must be given now, the universities are going to close. You know, some of these universities that I've talked to have not even paid the salaries since December. I mean, as Uganda Christian University, we were able to pay up to this month, but even this month, we were only able to pay partially. Now, this is the reality. Now, when the finalists come, they're not many enough for us to be able to meet the obligations. And this is what is meeting all the institutions that I'm talking about. As private institutions, I think that is a real struggle. Let me just say one other thing, because you gave me 3 minutes, and those 3 minutes are really finished. But I'll just say one little thing. There are a lot of inequities that we do see in government toward private institutions. That's why I'm so happy that this time, although I'm vice chancellor for all of the, I'm chairman for all vice chancellors, public and private, but there's a sense in which the private subsector of higher education is somehow always pushed to the side. Take, for example, I did read that I don't know if it is also going to be revised, that there was going to be a $2 million research fund that's going to be given out. Now, over the years, we've been trying to compete, to ask, not even to compete, because we are not even allowed to compete. We've been asking, can we at least take part in that research? Let us fall out because we are unable. And what does it do? Government normally brings the 2 million taxpayers' money and says it's only for public universities. And you say to yourself, does it mean then the other universities are training non-Ugandans or people that are Martians coming from the Mars? So these are realities that we are faced with, and it's my hope that going forward, there is going to be real engagement of the higher education subsector, especially the private one, but I think all of us need to be there because the public normally heard, but also I would plead for a tax holiday for the universities so that they can catch up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. And the other extra minutes were for you as chair of the chancellors, the vice chancellors in the public and private institutions. Let me now come to our final panelist here, Mr. Mark Mugabe, who is a program specialist at UN Women. Mugabe. We want to talk about the social impact, of course, on women, gender and women empowerment in Uganda. So please.
mouse. I have a neighbor who is a lady selling charcoal. She has been selling 3 bags. She now sells 1. And a quarter sack of cassava chips, which she fries. She no longer sells even 10 pieces. So these are the women whom we are talking about. They need some form of stimulus. But what I would agree with the Lamanzan, that should not go through the bureaucratic processes. These women have their organic circles, they have their organic VSLOAs. There's no rocket science in working with this, and they don't want free money. It can be interest-free. Well, if the money is available, it can be a grant. Between 50 about the agriculture sector as key in turning around the lives of these people. We all know that 60% of the labor force is employed in agriculture, and 80% of those are women. Leave alone the gender discriminatory norms and practices. These women can work and can gain from this intervention. I would like to give you an experience. We modeled around aquaculture. Aquaculture is fish farming. And we worked with the Bugiri District local government and our partner, Standard Bank, who are a private sector institution. But they are also thinking around how do we go beyond profits to model out interventions that later can be profitable, but at the beginning they may not be. So they gave us a 600,000 grant, and we went to aquaculture. We are supporting about 1,400 women in Bugiri to do aquaculture. It takes about 8 to 9 months to rear the fish, and the aquaculture has a big potential. Experts say we are only producing 140,000 tons in Uganda, and we are leading in the region. The potential is 1 million tons, okay? It's a bit capital intensive, but over time it is manageable, you know? Return on investment is 30 to 40%, and we are using natural water. There are no issues on land, because women land issues are also issues which you can talk about on another day. So if we invest in research, I think there will be a turnaround on the lives of these people. If it's 30 to 40%, I think this is good enough. The market, Uganda has a deficit of 33,000 tons. Kenya has 500,000 deficit. Import tilapia from China, and it is cheaper. Really, COVID has wakened up us. We can do better. The feeds industry, which has a forward and backward linkages for this sector, there's a lot to be desired. Feeds from Brazil, Mauritius, have a higher quality and they are cheaper. So why don't we support the feeds industry? It uses maize, soybean, and a bit of omega-3, which you can even innovate around the chia, which we grow here, but there's a lot of omega-3. So the feeds go down to meet this potential, okay? So the cages, they are gotten from China, the best, which can last for 10 years. Our artisans have been able to fabricate cages here, but they can't last for a year or two if you survive, and the product can even disappear. So this is a sector that we really need to support. And it can also support, as a forward linkage, the poultry and other sectors. So another example, we work with the Delight Industries. They are doing a lot of juice production, but I think they have been getting pulp from out of the country. But they want to get outgrowers, and we are supporting them to have 2,000 women in Noya and we are thinking of expanding. They have assured, they have done the analysis, they can do contract farming with these women, and these fruits, mango, guavas, take 50 years. And we have agreed with the district of Noya, and also the men, because land is an issue, to negotiate. And the men, please, not all men are bad in these gender issues. The men released their land and they signed a consent form, at least 1 acre for the married women. These are intervention and innovations we can work around even within the COVID, because the agriculture sector has not been hit very badly, but although it will also be hit in terms of markets. So that is also another innovation that we can do.
30 seconds, yes.
Yes. One other intervention we can do, which I think Parliament has done a good job, is to do gender and equity responsive procurement. Government is the biggest procurer. If you open these things through perfect competition, women will not be there. Kenya's done it. 30% of all government procurements, they go to the women. And it is incumbent on the sectors to build the capacity of the women, youth, and PWDs to support. You can imagine, government spends about 40, maybe to 50% of all the budget on procurements. We need, and it should not be on supplying water, sweeping. Yes, those are good to begin with, but we can build capacity, ICT, everything to support even road works. Why don't we implement that? Parliament, I hear, has approved it. The law is before the president, and that provision is there. But we appeal to Minister of Finance. I think we'll work on the guidelines. Please, let's actualize this. Lamandan said that there is a lot of rhetoric than action. I think this one should do work out magic, and you'll see money in the hands of these youth, women, and PWDs. For me, these are innovations that we can help during this COVID period.
Thank you very much, Enoch Mugabi from UN Women. I want to invite Susan Kavuma, your research associate with ACODE. If you can come, as you come, I'll tell you your question. But I wanted to prepare Albert. Albert, you'll have 2 minutes before I invite our closing remarks. Albert, you will be speaking to some of the questions or interventions that have been spoken to, especially in the education sector and the women. I wanted to add my voice to what Enoch said, with a question which was shared by Henry Nixon, who said over 80% of the smallholder farmers are women and they cannot get the agricultural guarantee scheme from UDB. And we know this year, or next financial year, UDB will be recapitalized, and I've heard the president speak to a bit around 1 trillion shillings. That conversation, Albert, you will speak to. But Susan, Dr. Susan, please come. And we are happy for you to capture any of the takeouts for yourself as a researcher from either, the commissioner or the vice chancellor. And you have just a minute and a half, and I'll be counting.
Thank you very much, Maurice, and I'm happy for the ambush. Hopefully, I'll be able to use the 1 minute that you've given me. Yes, as a researcher, we now need to dwell on the solutions more than the impact, because I think the PSST has informed us that a number of papers have been written on the impact of COVID. But now moving forward, where should we concentrate? Where should we focus more? Revenue generation as well as expenditure. But I think what is very pertinent from the discussion is that we all know that the revenue will be affected, but we need to find ways of how we can boost aggregate demand. And I think that is an issue that we need to really think about. Should we talk about the cash transfers, or we talk about injecting money in businesses? So I think that is where we really need to put our heads together and decide, because we don't have many resources. And what is optimal? Should we look at a cash transfer program that is nationwide, or targeting vulnerable people, or we focus more of our resources on injecting in businesses that can boost aggregate demand as well as aggregate supply?
I hope you noticed I was also trying to be gender sensitive. We had so many males speaking, And Clara and Dr. Susan have helped me. But I've been told it would be unfair. We had about 100 people on Zoom. So we will pick an Okello. Did I hear James Okello? Yes. James Okello, if you can take 30 seconds with your quick question. James? James Okello, you have 30 seconds. Your question, please. All right, Keith, I have lost the 30 seconds already. I will now come to you. Albert, please come. Feel free to use my podium. We sanitized it, and you are safe, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think my response will be a bit generic because, as the PS said, many of the answers to the questions that have been raised here are going to be responded to in the minister's response, which I think is this week. So I'll be a little bit more generic. I think that in this year's budget, we have had the biggest number of consultations because of the situation. And I think the focus, as you saw on the theme, is how are we going to stimulate this economy? And also what people are calling the fiscal stimulus. Basically, when we are talking about the fiscal stimulus, there are two things that we are talking about. One is increasing government expenditure in those areas that are going to increase demand and therefore lead to higher growth. And the second one is thinking about either tax relief in terms of tax cuts or tax deferrals, the kind of proposals that have been raised by Mugisha here. For example, waiving interest on tax arrears and so on. So those are all considerations that the ministry has been considering. But I want to put it in context of two things. One is the tax revenues, as the Commission already highlighted. Already, as you know, Uganda has been collecting a low tax GDP ratio, as you know. And so that has to be put into context. The second one is that even though our debt is low compared to other countries, but our debt service to revenue is quite high. And so the context has to be taken into account. It means, therefore, that the government has to have very innovative ways of approaching the fiscal stimulus. And the presentation from the key speaker actually points to some of these areas and the areas to target. So the choices that the government is going to make will make a very big difference between having a fiscal stimulus within the context that I've just highlighted because of the limited fiscal space. And that means that the private sector will still play an important role, even though in these kind of situations, the public sector has to play the leading role to stimulate the economy. Therefore, the areas that we have to focus on, as highlighted, are those groups that are going to actually stimulate this demand. Right? The women, the other vulnerable groups that we talked about. And therefore, how are we therefore going to be doing this? And I think the moderator pointed to the fact of the UDB. And I think this has already been pronounced, so I think I can ably talk about it. We obviously are going to put money in the UDB. We are going to capitalize that. It's already in the budget, but also we are going probably to put in more resources, as the President highlighted. And the idea is to provide affordable credit to groups, some of which would be, of course, there's an argument that UDB cannot reach the groups that we are talking about here. So how are we going to do that? And some of the ideas is to go through the microfinance center, for example, but also UDB will have to be more innovative in how they work. It's not going to be business as usual. So the discussions that we shall be having with the UDB, but also with the other credit institutions, not just the UDB, is how do we actually reach these groups at affordable credit that they can actually use and actually also help the government and the country as a whole to stimulate this economy. And the details, as I said, are going to be coming later in the minister's speech. I think I want to stop there so that I don't preempt that what the minister will say. But those are the issues that we shall be looking at. Thank you.
I really want to appreciate the PSST and the team at the ministry that have made the time to be part of this, what we are now calling the new normal, the e-conferences today. But I also am very respectful of the new safeguard. I will not preempt the minister. So we are all wondering whether you're in the know or you're not, you don't have the information yet. We are really preparing for the budget speech, sir. And we'll be looking forward to that. And we hope some of the proposals shared here can be captured. Allow me to request our partner, the Executive Director, CSBAG, Julius Mukunda, to come and make closing remarks.
Thanks, Morris. Thanks, all of you, for coming. I know I'm between hunger and food, and I'll try to make sure I'm brief as possible. One is, let's appreciate the efforts the government has done so far, despite the challenges. We know food is being distributed. It has taken long, but it's going on. We know Bank of Uganda has come up with a very good monetary policy. We are saying it's not enough, but it's a very good start. I think that's very important. We know the tax measures that have been put to the board. I think it is something that we need to appreciate. But also, we know that we usually hit supplementary budgets, but I think that it was the last one that came out, which we all appreciated in terms of ensuring that it deals with COVID-19. But also the citizens who sat in their homes painfully to ensure that we get out of this. I'm happy that today we are all speaking the same language. We have appreciated the problem and that we need to solve it. It is so difficult to tell somebody of a problem and they are not appreciating it. But today we are on the same page, and I appreciate the Minister of Finance for a change of heart. Where are we going? I think where we are going, the keynote was very clear. We need to go back on the drawing board and be innovative and smart if we want to come out of this crisis. But also, I think quite very important is transparency. We know in this period that's when mechanisms of transparency are shielded and money is being stolen or is being misused. And we call upon government to ensure that the issues of transparency are prominent. We will welcome the COVID-19 PFM guidelines, very important because people had started putting money in their pockets, and have been telling all my friends, the chief administrative officers, please bank that money on the designated account. Otherwise, you'd be in trouble. It was a very good one. We are still waiting to see how many MPs have returned back the 20 million, and for us, we keep on counting them. Every day they do that. Before I conclude, but I would like to also to inform our government people who are here that you sort of neglected us in this crisis as civil society organizations. You never even gave us stickers. And yet, all these brilliant people you see here, and the information that we are bringing is from civil society organizations. It's quite very important that we all appreciate our roles and also see how we can facilitate each other. But as usual, when you don't come to us, we're trying to ensure that we come to you. And here we are sharing with you how we can develop our country together. Let me thank the partners, the Minister of Finance, the staff who have been definitely in this. Let me thank Bank of Uganda. Let me thank Siatini and also Uganda Revenue Authority for this kind of collaboration and participation. We hope that what we have got here will inform what probably the President or the Minister will be speaking during the coming 2 weeks. And we look forward for, as people are saying, we are all anxiously waiting on how we can revamp our economy to protect our citizens, but also our farm. Thank you so much, Morris.
Thank you very much, Executive Director CS Bug. I want in a very, very special way to appreciate our panelists. Can we put our hands together for our panelists, those who joined us online and those who are physically here? We want to thank you all. We wish we had more time. There were a lot of questions for all of you, including URA, but I am aware URA will be holding 2 days of engagements online and in a specific gazetted area. We will have that discussion soon. So, on behalf of ACODE, the Minister of Finance, and CS Bug, we want to thank you all, our media partners NTV and NBS, for broadcasting this e-conference, this dialogue on the fiscal responses to COVID-19 pandemic and economic recovery measures. We want to thank our keynote speaker and the PSST for making time with his team to be able to answer these questions amidst this very difficult time. So to you all, thank you, God bless, and stay safe.